Hello friendos and randos, welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be discussing the new 6 starter decks that are coming out this weekend, ST15 to ST20, and of course we have the 6 leaders on screen now. We have Newgate, we have Uta, Don Quixote, Doflamingo, Luffy, Smoker, and Katakuri. So all of the starter decks full lists have been revealed for a while now. I've been doing a bit of testing with some of them. So far I have been testing the Dofi as well as Newgate, and I've also been testing Red Blue Mako with some of the new Whitebeard cards. Some of my friends are also working on the Katakuri deck. I think Uta is also something that we're looking on trying out. But first and foremost, I want to talk about the new cards in the deck list as well as the new starter decks themselves, and then after that we can do a quick rating as to how good I think each of these starters are and whether they are worth your money or not. Again, in Japan, these are all 550 yen starter decks, so they are actually very cheap. They are meant to be starter decks similar to the Uta starter deck, so you can expect a lot of reprints, and that's why it's also so cheap. And it's also why you're not seeing cards like from other starter decks like Queen or like, I guess from Uta you wouldn't be expecting SR Nami or maybe SR Boa in the Dofi deck. So they are just going to be reprints of like cheap commons and some stuff, and some of the new cards are really good. So I'm going to be just showing you guys what the cards are, and then of course having that context, I hope you guys temper your expectations for the deck list that they are going to provide as well. Okay, so first up we have of course the Newgate deck. These are the ratios that you have in the deck itself. I think it's really nice that they provided a 3 rares here in the Jozu, Mako, as well as the Izo Searcher. So those are all pretty decent reprints. And they of course let you have some of the basic other cards as well. Speed Jiro for 4-cost vanilla. They also gave you Namuru, the 3-cost vanilla, and you also have Haruta, the 2-cost attached rested Dawn character, the 2-cost blocker Fossa, and Rakuyo. And for the event slot, they've chosen to give You May Be a Fool But You're Still My Son. It's not the best event, but it is probably one of the most relevant Whitebeard events as well. Okay, so that is the reprints that they've provided in this deck, but I think of course everyone wants to talk about the new cards they've provided. You can see of course the new cards are at a 2-2-2 ratio, so you can expect to need to buy 2 of the starter deck in order to get playsets of these cards. So let's quickly take a look at the proxies provided by Ramadan for the English translations as well. So first off, of course, the new leader card looks really good. I think, of course, it's better than the base rare, but looks really good. If you prefer like more full body art versus the big face art of OP02, I think this is pretty nice. Personally, I think I do still prefer the OP02 art just because of the hee funny big face. But this art looks really sick as well. Okay, so first of the new cards is Atmos. He's a 4-cost 5k power with 1k guard, and his effect is when attacking, if your leader is Edward Newgate, you cannot add life cards to your hand using your own effects during this turn. So I think this is a really strong 4-cost character. The fact that if he doesn't get removed, you're able to delay your leader effect by 1 turn is really strong as well. So if you are playing this on curve, for example, you can probably use your 9 beard at maybe even 3 life, which is really strong in my opinion. Not only that, it really forces your opponent to remove it, or else you get to delay the game and stay at a higher life count along with your 6k base, which is really powerful. So having tested with this card, I think is really strong in this deck. Okay, next is the 7-cost Newgate. I think this is a really powerful card as well. So on play, give your leader or one of your characters up to 1 rested Dawn, and then activate main, you may rest this character to KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 5k or less power. So I think the very obvious synergy with this card is going to be in the Red Blue Mako deck. It's really powerful to be able to play this on 7 and then KO a 7k power character on curve. So most characters would be within this range because except for 6-cost vanillas, most 6-cost characters are 6-cost or lower characters are 7k power or less, which means this can legitimately KO anything on curve for a Red Blue Mako deck. And of course, if you're using things like Otama or the new Tetch as well, you can also extend that range a little bit further. I think in Newgate himself, he probably wouldn't want to use this card. The 7 cost 8k stat line is nice, but it not having counter is going to be a huge detriment to that deck. Of course, the 7 cost stat line also means that you can't clear it from your hand too easily, and they still refuse to let red have cycling or drawing cards, so I think that's going to still be one of the main weaknesses that decks like Newgate, Zoro, any other red deck will have, and why Newgate probably won't be running this card in its deck as well. The good thing is that the rest of the cards are still pretty reasonably good, so you might still see quite a few upgrades for the Newgate deck. Next is King Dew. He is a 3/4 blocker, and his effect is when this character is KO'd by your opponent's effects, up to one of your leader gains plus 2000 power during this turn. So really strong, especially against black decks. It allows your leader to go up to 8k base. And again, this is not leader locked, so it can also be useful in any other red deck as a anti-KO type of blocker. Of course, the main issue is that at the end of the day, he is still a blocker, so if you are on low enough knife, you'll be forced to use him as a blocker, and then you won't be able to use his effect anymore. So placing him down on a pre-lethal turn is going to be very important as well. However, I don't know if he's better than, for example, the 4-cost Mako, because at the end of the day, he does get removed and he doesn't stick on the board. But he can be very strong for preventing lethal, especially in decks like Whitebeard, where you do have a very large hand size, and that plus 2k base is going to be very important. Okay, next we have Thatch. So Thatcher's effect is on play, if your leader has the Whitebeard Pirates type, then you can give up to one of your opponents minus 2k power for the turn, and then after that put the top card of your life into your hand. So it's kind of like Otama, except for the fact that it's leader locked, because it has that 2k power stat line, and other than that, it also puts the top card of your life into your hand. So this also is a drawback for decks like Mako, for Ace, where you can't use it as freely as an Otama, but it is still searchable, so that is probably the biggest strength it has over using the Otama. And in decks like Whitebeard, you probably will be on 0 life when you're going to use a card like Thatch or Otama anyway, because you are probably going to use it in conjunction with, let's say, a 5-cost Mako to KO a blocker, or your 9-cost Newgate's attack when attacking effect in order to KO a blocker, which is why it's actually not that big of a drawback anyway. Okay. And the last new card that they've printed for the Red Newgate starter deck is a new 5-cost Podcast the Ace. So I think this is a really strong card. 5-cost 6k, if your leader has the Whitebeard Pirates in its type, then this character gains Rush, so pretty good. Also has 1k counter, which is very fantastic as well. 5-6 with 1k guard Rush is really good. And then lastly, it's once per turn, if this character were to be removed from play by one of your opponent's effects, instead you may give this character minus 2k for the turn. So it's also sticky. So for example, if you're playing against a black deck, or even against RP Law, if they were to try and bottom deck it with their leader effect, then you could just make this character a 4k power unit instead. And while it would be easier to hit into it, so for example, if a Lucci were to try and KO it with a Kaku, and then after that they would swing 5k into it, you can still protect it pretty easily with like a 2k counter or anything like that. So being able to stick your bodies on the board against removal based decks is really important. So it's a really nice buff, I think, for leaders like Ace, Red Blue Mako, as well as Newgate. I think the most important part about it is that it has 1k counter. So previously, the only good rush character with 1k counter was the 6-cost ST10 Sanji, which some Strawbeard builds did use. But now with this new 5-6 Ace, I think it's probably going to be much better and much more consistent as well, because it is searchable off of Ezo and the Whitebeard Pirates Searcher event. So now with this, as well as the 5-cost Mako, you have a total of like 8 cards that are not KOable by effects, which I think is really good. Okay, so that's it for the Newgate starter. All in all, I think the starter is pretty solid. It gives a pretty good buff to both Newgate as well as Red Blue Mako. I think other than that, the King Dew for now, I'm not evaluating it very highly, but I think it could be pretty strong in decks like Zoro, or maybe even Red Purple Law could consider using it as a 3-4 blocker, which will make it have a slightly better matchup into Black Lucci as well. But other than that, I think the main decks that will benefit from this are of course going to be Whitebeard, Red Blue Mako, and Red Ace. All that being said, I think this starter deck probably gets like a B from me. What I would say is, if it were cards that were all very like generically good and a lot of decks would be able to benefit from the cards, then it will probably get like an A or an S. But because most of the cards here are locked to like Whitebeard Pirates type leaders, for now I'm just giving it like a B. In terms of overall impact on the format, I think Red Blue Mako is going to receive a very, very strong buff in this 7-cost Newgate and the 5-cost Ace. So I do expect that to probably rise in representation a little bit after this weekend. Next up, we do have the Uta starter deck. So this is the second green Uta starter deck we've received, and most of the reprints here are actually from the promotional Uta Film Red Encore set. I think that's what it's called, the Film Red Encore set, where they printed a bunch of new events for Uta, and previously these events were exclusive to this Encore set. So now you can get them in a much easier way, which is through this starter deck. And the other cards they've also reprinted is the 2-cost Bartolomeo. This card actually didn't see much play towards the more recent Uta deck list, but it's nice that they've provided an easier way to get it still. So that's still a pretty good plus. And other than that, of course, they've also printed 5 new cards, just like with all of the other all of the other ST15 to 20 cards. So let's quickly talk about the new cards as well. So first things first, of course, the new leader card. I think this is much nicer than the starter deck Uta leader that we have available. So I think it's going to be a very big upgrade on that front. It's very, very pretty. I think the art looks really good. It's also by B-Side. B-Side is pretty prevalent One Piece card artist, so really enjoy their work as well. Okay, next we have the 4-cost Uta blocker. So this is a 4-cost 6k blocker, no counter, and its effect is activate main once per turn. You may trash 1 film type card from your hand and give your leader or up to one of your characters up to 1 rested Dawn. So personally, I don't think this card is that great, because you do have to discard 1 card in order to get the 1 rested Dawn, which is kind of weak. And the card is also locked to being a film type card, so you can't discard like any random break. Like for example, if you're playing Uta and you have too many top end, like you have too many 10-cost Dofis or 8-cost kids or something like that, you're not able to trash any of those. You can only trash film type cards from your hand. So I think that is a little weak. And other than that, it doesn't have any other like effect other than this 1 rested Dawn, which is not great, I think. Like for example, comparing it to, I guess later in the Doflamingo deck, the blue boa card, that card I think is significantly better than this Uta card. I think the vision, of course, is that by having Uta on the board, you are able to play on a still on curve, so you can always use up all of your Dawn, and then you can discard 1, for example, like a break event in your hand, and then use your leader effect with the 1 rested Dawn in order to still +1, like, so it's not really going negative on hand. But I don't know, I don't think it's that great. I think it would have been better if it were to like restand 1 rested Dawn instead. That might have been a little bit stronger, but this is just okay in my opinion. Yep. Okay. Next card is the new 2-cost Gordon blocker. Gordon is a cool dude. He's crying, poor guy. All right. So he's a 2-cost 0 power blocker. So this is our second film type blocker at 2 costs, and his effect is when opponent attacks, you may trash any number of music type cards from your hand. So that includes all of the events that Uta has, and your leader or one of your characters gains plus 1000 power during this battle for every card trashed. Notably, this isn't a once per turn effect, so you can use this each time your opponent attacks in order to, you know, turn any of your bricks in your hand, like your brick events, like your backlights, your new eras, new genesis, I can't remember the English names of some of these. Your Shinjidais, your Gyakos, your I'm Invincibles and things like that, and you can turn those into 1k counter, which is pretty good. Other than that, of course, it is a searchable blocker, which is also pretty decent. The other searchable film blocker before was Bruno, which was just a 2 cost 2k vanilla blocker, so it's nice that they gave another 2 cost blocker option here. I still don't think it's that good. It's just okay in my opinion. Okay, next is the 3 cost Katakuri. This card is really good. So its effect is if your leader has the film type and you have 6 or more rested cards, this character gains plus 2000 power. So of course rested cards includes Dawn, your characters, as well as your leader, and it also counts itself, so this is really good. So going first, for example, on 3 Dawn you can play this, and then on 5 Dawn you can play for example a 4 cost Brook, then swing with your leader with 1 attached Dawn, and then you swing with your category, and then you will have 4 rested Dawn, your rested leader, and the rested category itself. So that's pretty good in my opinion, that you're able to have that play on curve, which is essentially, this is a 3/6 character, and other than that, you're able to play this off of the 4 cost Brook as well, so that's a pretty decent synergy. So on your 4 Dawn turn you can play Brook into this, and then on 6 Dawn you can play a 4 cost again, swing with your leader, swing with your Brook, and then you swing with the Katakuri, and you have 6 rested things. So again, pretty strong. 3/6 is a very good stat line, and the 2k power stays on your opponent's turn as well, so it is harder to hit into, and will save you counter in hand if your opponent tries to clear it. So I quite like this card. It has both the film and the Big Mom Pirates type, so I guess if you're playing like a green-yellow deck, if they ever make a green-yellow film deck, you can search this with a pudding searcher as well. But yeah, I think that's just a small like extra trait. It probably isn't going to be very relevant, at least for now. It's a pretty good card for Uta. Just replaces the 3 cost vanilla that we had before, just a very small little buff, which is pretty convenient. And the fact that it's leader lock will just make it so that it's only going to be used in Uta for now. So small things, I guess. Okay, next is the boss monster of the deck, 9 cost Shanks, 9 cost 11k power. I don't think we have anything on this stat line as of yet, so this is probably the first of its kind. And then on play, it KOs up to one of your opponent's rested characters. So just anything that's rested is KOable. So 10 cost 12k, 10 cost 10k, doesn't really matter. Even the 11 cost Jack is KOable with this, which is really good, I think. So if you're going first and your opponent plays Jack, and then on their 8 Dawn turn, you can just drop this and KO the Jack, which is, I think, very powerful. Other than that, it is a bit of a underwhelming card. Like it does just KO a rested character, so it's not like, I think it's not enough to make green playable again, especially in the current meta. Because I think what green really needed was more like anti-KO stuff, and I think this isn't going to save them. But it does help where the idea where like for example, you can do a 10 cost Doflamingo into this, because previously if you use 10 cost Dofi and you didn't have like multiple 10 cost Dofi, you would eventually lose, because they would still be building board and you weren't really dealing with their board, you were just like locking it, and the moment you run out of 10 cost Dofi, they will just swing at you with all of their board again. But now at least you kind of have an answer to like some of the big rested characters instead. Okay, I think lastly we have a new 2k counter, 2 cost 3k Luffy. It's technically a 2 cost 4k, so if your Uta is rested, this character has plus 1000 power. So it is a 2 cost 3k that becomes a 2 cost 4k, which is, I guess, just a vanilla stat line. It has Film, Supernova, and Straw Hat Crew as well. So I think it's pretty interesting that they decided to give this card Supernova in its stat line, because they didn't used to give like film cards Supernova in the stat line. And I mean, technically at this point he's not really a Supernova anymore, because I mean, you can see like the 8 cost Film Luffy, the 8 cost vanilla Film Luffy doesn't have the Supernova tagline, the Gear 5th looking Luffy, I mean. So it's kind of interesting that they decided to give it that stat line. This also means that of course it's searchable by Bonnie, so maybe decks like Bonnie or even like Kid will be using this as an additional searchable 2k counter, but I don't really think it's that great. So that's that for the Uta starter deck. It's very nice that they reprinted all of the new events in the promo set, so I think that's really good. But other than that, I think the new cards aren't really that strong. I would probably give this like a C in terms of like rating it compared to the rest of the starter decks, especially because, for example, the Doflamingo starter deck is really good, and this one just feels kind of lackluster compared to that. So speaking of that, we do have the Doflamingo starter deck next. It is really strong. They've reprinted some really good cards like the 3-cost Doflamingo blocker. They've reprinted starter deck Gecko Moria, which is really good also because it's one of the only cards that you really need from the starter deck now. They've reprinted the promo Jinbei, which is not super hard to get in Asia, but I know it was really expensive in the West, so it's nice that they printed that as well. And then of course you also have Blocker Law, you have the starter deck Mihawk, the 2k counter, and you also have Weevil, and you have the 3-cost Searcher Kuma, and you have 4-cost Vanilla Moria. So all of these, this is actually probably the most playable out of the box starter deck. I think it has a lot of good staples. You could probably just buy this starter deck and then you would probably replace the Jinbei and the Weevil, and you could technically just play it right off the bat. But let's look at all of the new cards first. I think this deck is really strong. I've tested it a little bit. I've been testing with the new cards. I think it's the only starter deck where all 5 of the new cards are really good. And although they are leader locked, I think they have a lot of potential. So let me quickly go through the cards so that you know what I'm talking about. First up, of course, we have the new leader. I think it looks really good. I like the string effects and everything as well. I think it looks very clean. I do prefer the 01 alternate art a little bit more, but again, this is really nice still. And also, of course, the art is by B-Side. So first up, we have Crocodile. So the 4/5 stat line and then counter plus 1k, and on play, reveal the top card of your deck, and if that card has the 7 Warlocks of the C type, draw 2 cards and then place 1 card from your hand on top of your deck. So this is really good because it is draw 1 essentially, and it also lets you filter your hand in the sense where you can put a brick that you're not going to use this turn, but you still kind of want to keep in your hand. For example, like a 6-cost Boa, you don't really need it at the moment because it has no counter, and you can put it on top of your deck and then you can just draw into it next turn. On top of that, if you haven't used your leader effect this turn, you can play down the Crocodile and gamble, and if you're lucky you can review the top card, and also just if you hit, then you draw 2 and then you can rig a card from your hand. Alternatively, if you've already rigged your top deck, so for example you've already used Perona or Doflamingo blocker or something like that, you can play the Crocodile from hand, and then after that you can set one of your Warlocks from hand. So for example, if you had a Jinbei in hand but you didn't have a Jinbei or something in your top 6, in your top 5, then you can swap that Jinbei back to the top of your deck and then use your leader effect when attacking, which is really good as well. On top of that, this card doesn't need the revealed card to be 4-cost or lower. So for example, you can also use it to reveal the 6-cost Boa from the top of your deck, and then you can use, for example, when you use your first Perona, you didn't have your top 5 didn't have any 4-cost Warlords, or it didn't really have any good targets. So maybe you hit a Buggy, a few events, you hit 6-cost Boa, but you have a bunch of Warlords in hand. Then you can use your Crocodile to reveal the Boa, draw 2 and then rig a Jinbei from hand or something like that. So that's really good. I think it's a very strong card, and the fact that it's a +1 is very good as well. So I think this is definitely going to be a fall off in any Dofi deck moving forward. This could even be pretty decent for a Boa deck as well, just because it is a positive card draw. And other than that, I was also thinking of maybe using this for Nami, because for one, the effect also triggers on any type of card, so it doesn't have to be a character card. So in a Nami deck, you can also use it to trigger off of Desert Spada, Overheat, Of course, it triggers off itself. It triggers off of Love Beam. So all of these cards trigger the crocodile effect. So I think it's a potential card if you're using like a warlord version of Nami. Okay, next is Trafalgar Law card. Is really good as well, I think. 4 cost 5k power, and then on play, you may return one of your characters to your owner's hand. So return to your own hand, and then after that, if your leader has the 7 warlords of the C type, return up to 1 cost 4 or lower character to its owner's hand. So you can use this to return like your Perona or your new buggy to your hand, and then after that bounce off your opponent's characters. So I think this is pretty good, especially on curve. Like if you're playing this on like 5 Dawn turn, for example, off of your leader effect, you can use it to bounce your buggy, and then with the remaining Dawn, of course, you can play down that buggy or Perona, and then also remove your opponent's 4 cost character. So it's pretty decent. The main issue with bouncing, of course, as a form of removal is that most characters at that cost range have a really good like on play effect, so you don't really want to bounce it. So things like, I guess you're not going to bounce like a Reiju, you're not going to bounce a 4 cost Reducer Law, you're not going to bounce Rebecca to hand. So sometimes bouncing is really weak, but I think what's really good about this is that it serves as a pretty good lethal kind of card, because you can call it from the top of your deck, right? So for example, if you had you knew you were setting up lethal on your opponent the next turn, and they have like a Rebecca on board, or they're probably going to do like a Moria Rebecca spend 9 Luigi combo on you, right? Or maybe your opponent is like they play like Blocker Law or something. So if you rig this on the top of your deck, you can swing with your leader and then pay 1 to bounce a 4 cost, which I think is really good as well. So that's definitely something that I think if you're playing against Doflamingo, you will have to play around moving forward. Like maybe they will be able to bounce one of your 4 cost characters like a blocker for only 1 Dawn. Alright, next is Buggy. It's also a 2k counter, 1 cost 2k counter, and 2k power as well. So on play, look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then place them in any order on the top of your deck only. So this isn't able to filter to the bottom of your deck, which is, I think, a pretty big weakness. But it is a 2k counter, and it is the warlords of the C type, so it is searchable off of Sengoku. Is also pickable up. You can also pick it up from your trash with the new the OST Gecko Moria. So I think it's a really good upgrade as well in terms of 2k counters. I think Doflamingo already had very good 2k counter options in the past. So of course there's the Mihawk, there's the New Law from 07, there is the Crocodile from 07 as well, and now we have this, so it's really good. And I think second last but not least, we have a new 4 cost 6k power Boa. So this is a really good card. I was mentioning earlier that the Uta card felt very lackluster compared to this, because this character's effect is on play, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you can place them at any order in the top or bottom of your deck, and then after that you can give up to one of your 7 warlords of the C type leader or characters up to 1 rested Dawn. For example, on your 6th Dawn turn, you can play down this Boa, and then after that look at your top 3, attach 1 rested Dawn to your leader, and with your remaining 1 active and 1 rested, you attach 1 to leader and swing 7 plus rest 1 Dawn to play down to the top deck with your leader effect. So this is really good, because this means you can develop 2 sides much better, going second especially. So this card alone makes me feel like you might want to go second with Doflamingo, because on 4 Dawn you can play Jinbei into another 4 cost, and then if you're lucky and you found a second Jinbei plus this card, you can play that second Jinbei and the Boa and then use your leader effect, or you can just play your 3 cost blocker Dofi and then use your leader effect as well. So it does give you much more options on your 6th Dawn turn as well. And if you're playing, of course, the 6 cost Boa, you can also just drop that on curve, which is also pretty powerful. So I think going second is actually really good now as Doflamingo. And if your top end, for example, you're playing like the 10 cost kind of units, then that's also going to be quite powerful. Alright, and lastly we have Marshall D. Teach, 2 cost 3k power warlord, activate main once per turn, place 1 card from your hand to the top of your deck, and then attach up to 2 rested Dawn to one of your leader or characters. So I think it's pretty decent, because you can play it down, and then after that you can rig your top deck. If you didn't find like a Buggy or Perona, you can use this to just play cards from your hand with your leader effect instead. What I don't like about this card is that I've never really felt the need to drop it, and the other thing is that one of the biggest strengths I feel for Doflamingo is that by being able to play cards from the top of your deck, your hand size doesn't go down. But by playing the Teach, you're technically going down 2 on your hand size because you drop the Teach from your hand, and then you also drop 1 card from your hand to the top of your deck. So instead of going technically +1 by using your leader effect to bring down a new card from the top of your deck, you're just going like -2 by playing down the Teach and then playing down 1 card from your hand. I realized that probably like it's better than, in the sense that it's better than Perona, in the sense where sometimes you Perona and you don't see good targets, so you would rather bottom it. But I feel like it's probably better to just play down the 4 costs from hand directly instead of playing the Teach and then after that using its effect. Of course, the one good thing about this is that it's usable every turn. But I think realistically in this meta, you're probably not going to have it stay on the board for very many turns anyway. So that's probably the trade-off in my opinion. Personally, when I tested it, I felt like I would rather have Perona there most of the time. But I think it's worthy to, like, you know, keep trying to test it a little bit more and then see what happens from there instead. So yeah, I think we'll see whether it ends up being a good card or not moving forward. But yeah, I think out of like all of the starter decks, the Dofi deck has the best cards. Like all of the new cards are very, very good. Like they are almost, except for the Teach, which I think is still arguable, but every single card here is a 4-off in the Dofi deck. Like the Law, the Crocodile, the Boa, and the Buggy, they're all very, very, very good cards. And I expect to see all of them at 4 copies in any Dofi deck moving forward. And that's how good I kind of think they are. So I think moving forward, that's what you can kind of expect from this deck as well.